To introduce Flash, we're going to first create a frame-by-frame animation. This is the type of animation that animators from years past used to use in order to create cartoons and other types of moving pictures by drawing them on cells, although we're going to be doing it in the computer. And so think of it as sort of a flip book that we're going to create using the computer. Now when you first open Flash, there's this first screen where you can either create from template, create a new, or learn. These are some things which will teach you how to use some of the basic functions of Flash. What we're going to use every time is an ActionScript 2.0. So just go ahead and open up ActionScript 2.0. Now the interface of Flash looks a little different than some of the other Adobe programs. This is what's called Stage right here, this white square right here. And anything in the gray area here is off stage. So if you think of this as, say, a theater, and we're sitting in the audience, the stage is where the actors or the action would come on. The scenes would come on, the backgrounds would come down, and they would come from off stage. So anything in this gray area you won't be able to see. If we wanted something to come on stage and say it's appearing from off the stage, then we would start it here and then we would, along the timeline, gradually move it onto the stage. And depending on how many frames we use, that's how long it's going to take for the object to come onto this stage. We also have up here, we have scene 1, and we can create multiple scenes and therefore thereby organizing our stage. Now down here is our timeline, and much like Illustrator, Photoshop, or some of the other Adobe programs, we have layers. And we can use the layers to create different things that are either on top of or behind other things. If I click on the timeline and come over here to my properties, these are the properties of my stage. First of all, here's the stage size. Right now it's 550 by 400 pixels, and that is the typical size of a stage. But I can edit this if I'd like and change it to a different size. I'm just going to go ahead and keep it at 500 by 550 by 400. We can also use different units. We can also change the color and the frame rate. We can do those here as well. So if I wanted to say click here, I could choose a black background, and now my background is black. However, I want to choose a white background, and we're going to just keep it white for now. Also, the frames per second. 24 frames per second is very liquid looking, very fluid motion. You won't see a lot of jittering or stuttering. Cartoons are usually a little lower frame rate. Blu-ray movies are shot in 24 frames per second, and VHS and DVDs were shot in 29 frames per second. We're going to use 15 frames per second for this particular exercise, so go ahead and click this and you can type 15, or you can just grab this with your mouse and scroll back and forth until you hit 15. I always find it easier to just type it in because then I don't have to mess around with it too much. Alright, so let's talk about the timeline down here. If I look here on layer 1, and these are my frames, and so they count by fives, but each one of these little tiny squares here is a frame. So this is frame 1, this is frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, frame 5, and so on and so forth. That means if we're doing 15 frames per second, 15 is right here. That means that from here to the end is 1 second of time. So whatever I do here is going to take 1/15th of a second to happen. Okay, so whatever your frames per second is, just think if we were to say make this 31 frames per second, then that means that at 31, 1 second has elapsed. This is my time for 1 second of something to happen. So the higher the frame rate, the more intervals we need in order to make a motion. So if we use a lower frame rate, we don't need to draw as many things in order for time to pass. We'll get more into that later, but I just wanted to explain that. Now, this first frame right here has a little circle, a little empty circle on it. That is what's called a keyframe. And keyframes indicate that something is happening on the stage, some change is being made. If it's empty, it means there's a change, but there's nothing on the stage. And so if we go over here and say take our paintbrush tool, and I'm just going to, let's see, I'll use a bigger brush size. Yeah. So if I take my brush and draw something here, notice that the keyframe is now filled in black. Okay, so this indicates that something is happening on the stage. If I were to use my selection tool and highlight this and delete it, then the keyframe goes back to nothing. If I take that same brush stroke and take my selection tool and select everything except for a little piece of it, so now I've left a little piece of it, it's still solid because something is on the stage. So that black dot indicates that something has changed on the stage. We are going to make a basic animation using a little box. So right here is where my fill color is, and this is my stroke color. The stroke color for me is already set to no stroke, and if you want to change it manually, you can come up here and just choose no stroke right here, this little slash. We don't want a stroke. We do want a color, however, and you can use any color you want as long as we can see it. It can't be white. I'm just going to use the blue that we have here, but you can choose greens, purples, yellows, whatever, as long as we can see it. Actually, please don't use like anything close to white. So this color right here would not be very good. Use a bold version of whatever color you'd like. Okay, so go ahead and use blue or red or green or whatever. This stripe right here would be good to use. So I'm going to use blue, and I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and just like in all the other Adobe programs, I'm going to hold Shift and drag this square right here. Drag a perfect box. And I'm going to make it about this size. Okay? Don't make it too large. Make it roughly this size. Now what I'm going to do is use my selection tool. I'm going to highlight the box, and right now it's pixels. Okay? Pixels means that we can break this image apart. It's not one solid shape, and you can tell because there's little white dots that show up on it. And when we get into shape tweening, you're going to use this kind of an image. If we have something like a group or a symbol, which is what I'm going to teach you how to do in just a second, then you don't do shape tweens, you use classic tweens, and we're going to talk about those later too. But in the meantime, since these are pixels, if I highlight this part of the box and only that piece is highlighted, I can actually break it apart and take a piece of it away. So in this way, Flash is kind of an easy program to draw or take things apart with because you can just highlight pieces of it and then take them away. Okay? But I want to go back in time, so I'm going to undo, Control Z, back until my box is full again. I'm going to convert this into a symbol, and I'm going to talk to you more about symbols in the future, but I just want to make sure that this is a symbol right now. So I'm going to highlight the whole box so that the entire thing has little white dots on it, and I'm going to go to Modify, and I'm going to say Convert to Symbol. I can also type F8 on the keyboard, and it will take me to the Convert to Symbol dialog box. So this symbol we're going to name, I'll just name it blue square. And it's important that you name your symbols so that you know what they're all called. And there's three types of symbols. There's a movie clip, a button, and a graphic. We are only ever going to use movie clip and button. We are never going to use graphic. A movie clip essentially does everything that a graphic can do and much, much more, and there's no reason not to just use a movie clip instead of using a graphic. And buttons are like for web pages, and they take you to different places. So I always use movie clip. I never ever use graphic. And if you use graphic, you're limited in the things that you are able to do with that symbol. But movie clip, you can do anything to it, and so I always just use movie clip just to be safe. Okay, so movie clip is the regular type. Name a blue square, click OK. Now you'll notice that the little white dots have gone away. That means that this thing is either a group or a symbol. Okay. Now the way that we can tell what this thing is if I click on it and come over to the properties, it says it's a movie clip right here. Okay. If I were to take this box right here and draw another shape, and this shape is not a graphic or a movie clip or a button, it's not a group, it's just individual pixels, the properties tell me that it's a shape right over here. So that's how I can tell what this thing is. Even if I were to highlight this thing and go to Modify and choose Group, which we've done in Illustrator, see there's a little white or a little box around it, and now when I select it, I don't see those little white dots. Here, it looks a little different. I've got a center point. It also tells me it's a movie clip over here in the properties. This one tells me that it's a group. Groups are also powerful because you can use tweening with it. Tweening is where the computer draws the in-between frames for us, which is not what we're going to do in this exercise. So the group has its advantages and disadvantages, but symbols are really where Flash can do a lot of things, and we're going to get into more of those later on. Okay, so let's go ahead and throw this one away, delete, and we're going to use this movie clip. I'm going to put this kind of up here in the corner so that there's a little bit of space here and a little bit of space there. And we're going to do some animation with this, kind of like a flip book, if you've ever made one of those. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is, this is what's happening on keyframe 1 of layer 1. We're going to go to the very next frame right here. So I'm going to click the next frame so it's highlighted with a light blue. And you can either right click it and go to Insert Keyframe. If you insert a blank keyframe, I'll show you what happens. If I insert a blank keyframe, my box goes away because it exists on this frame, but if it's a blank keyframe, that means that it's cleared the stage. The stage no longer has anything on it. And so you'll see there's a little circle on here that's empty, and that means that there's nothing going on. What I want to do is undo that. There we go. Now what I want to do is insert a keyframe, and what inserting a keyframe does is it copies whatever was on the previous frame to the new frame. So now this box exists on this next frame, and it exists on the frame before it. So this, as we move through our timeline, this box is going to stay, or is just basically going to copy what was previously on there. And you're going to see this box move across the stage eventually. Okay? So another thing we can do, instead of insert or going up here to insert keyframe, I'm going to undo that. Control Z until this keyframe goes away. There we go. Another thing we can do is if I click right here, and this is a faster way to do it, if I hit F6 on the keyboard, it creates a keyframe also. And that's what we're going to do for this exercise, because it's going to save us a lot of time. Alright, so what we're going to do is move this box diagonally down and then diagonally back up again, so it makes a little V shape. Okay, right now it's in the exact same spot that it was before, but we're going to arrow it down once and arrow it over once. Now don't do this step yet, but if I just show you the arrows, if I arrow, it nudges it down very slowly. So I'm arrowing, 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 and it's going down the screen very slowly, but it takes a really long time to get anywhere. So I'm going to undo all those. And instead, if I hold Shift and hit my arrow down once, it goes down 10 times with your arrow press, basically, or 10 times the amount. And I'm also going to arrow over to the right. Okay? So if I grab this little pink scrubber, this is what's called scrubbing through an image, and I go back and forth with it, my box was there, and now it's moved here. So you can see what's happening with the box. I'm going to go to frame 3, and I'm going to hit F6 to create a keyframe, and I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to hit arrow down and arrow to the right, just like we did before. So now it's going down slowly, see? 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to go to frame 4, hit F6 again, and I'm going to hold Shift, hit arrow down, arrow to the right. Now what really helps is if we can see where this thing has been before us. And there's something called onion skin, and what that does is it shows us what has been happening in the past with this particular, with the whole timeline basically. And that's located right here. If I hover my mouse down here, and you can't see it, but it highlights onion skin, this little button right here. It'll say onion skin below the mouse. So I'm going to click onion skin, and see, I can see back to the beginning. This is my onion skin right here. If I grab it and pull it like this, it'll show me just the frame before it. If I grab this and pull it all the way over to the left, then it shows me everything that's happened previously. Okay, I'm going to go to frame 6, and I'm going to hit F6. Actually, that's frame 5. Frame 5, and hit F6 to create a new keyframe. I'm going to hold Shift and hit arrow down and arrow to the right. Okay, I'm going to go to frame 6, hit F6, Shift, down to the right. We're going to keep this going for quite a while. So I'm going to go to frame 7, I'm going to hit F6 on my keyboard, hold Shift, go down and to the right. Go to frame, next frame, hit F6, shift down and to the right. Go to the next frame, hit F6, hold shift, go down and to the right. Now be careful, don't go too fast or you may make a mistake. We want this to look like fluid motion. Also, if you notice, I've got my main square here, which is the keyframe I'm on, and then the frame previous to it, and previous, and previous, and previous. See what's going on here? The onion skin here is showing me what's happening before and after, and I can make the onion skin go longer, so it shows me everything, or I can make it go shorter, and I can make it so that it only shows me the past, or I can make it so that it only shows me the future. See? That's this little gray box here, and you can grab a hold of these and move them back and forth. Okay? Now, what I want to do is pull this back to the beginning and see my progress so far. Now, if I grab my little pink scrubber here, and I scrub through the image, this is what's been happening. So this will actually animate so far. Once we get to frame 15, I'll show you how to preview this. Okay, I'm going to click on frame 10, hit F6, hold shift, hit arrow down, arrow to the right. Go to frame 11, hit F6, hold shift, hit down and to the right. Go to frame 12, hit F6, shift, down and to the right. Go to the next frame, hit F6, hold shift, go down and to the right. Next frame, hit F6, hold shift, go down and to the right. Frame 15, F6, shift, down and to the right. Alright, so this is what we have so far. I'm going to show you how to preview this really quick, so we can just see the progress of what's happened so far. If I go up to this control menu, and I go up to test scene, it'll show me this scene just play. It'll just play in a new window. So this is what we have so far. Our box moving down the screen. Pretty cool, huh? We've created this animation. It's just flipping through the flip book, if you want to think of it that way, of this box going down to the center of the screen here. Okay? But we're going to continue. I want this thing to come down just about to the middle, and then we're going to go up into we're going to go up the other direction. I'm going to go to the next frame, hit F6, hold shift, go down and to the right. Next frame, hit F6, hold shift, hit your down arrow and the right arrow. And we're going to just keep doing this. F6, shift, down, right. Next one, hit F6, shift, down and to the right. Next one, hit F6, shift, down and to the right. Alright, that's pretty good. I'm going to start going up now. So I'm going to click the next frame, hit F6, and I'm going to go up. Oh, whoops. Shift, up and to the right. Next frame, F6, shift, up and to the right. Next frame, F6, shift, up and to the right. Next frame, F6, shift, up and to the right. Next frame, hit F6, hold shift, up and to the right. Next frame, F6, shift, up and to the right. Now, eventually we're going to have to see like where we're meeting up with the next row here, so I can increase my onion skin by grabbing hold of it and moving it to the beginning. We still have a little ways to go, but we can see this happening. Now every time we add a new keyframe, and I'm going to go ahead and click this and make a new keyframe, F6, one of these disappears up here because it only shows us this many frames. We have to keep increasing the onion skin in order to see the beginning. So I'm actually going to get it up into this area first, and then I'm going to check it out later. So let's go to the next frame, make sure it's the next available frame here, hit F6, hold shift, go up and to the right. Next frame, hit F6, up and to the right. Next frame, F6, up and to the right. Next frame, F6, up and to the right. Next frame, F6, shift, up and to the right. Next frame, F6, make sure that you're holding shift before you hit the arrow keys. F6 up and to the right, otherwise you're going to see a stall in the middle of what you've been doing. So it'll like hiccup or stop a little bit and then it'll keep going. So you want to make sure that you're always using your shift key before you hit the arrows. Next frame, F6, shift up and to the right. Next frame, F6, shift up and to the right. And if you do happen to make a mistake, then you can always undo it with Control Z. Next frame, F6, shift up and to the right. I'm going to grab my onion skin and pull it. We still have a little bit of ways to go. Next frame, F6, shift up and to the right. Next frame, F6, shift up and to the right. Next frame, F6, shift up and to the right. Next frame, F6, shift up and to the right. Let's see where we are at. Oh, looks like we're there. Alright. Now that we're here, I'm going to do one more keyframe, F6, then I'm going to do another keyframe. I want that thing to sit still for just a moment. I'm actually going to add one more keyframe, F6, so that this thing stays there for 2 frames. Okay, it's going to go up, it's going to pause for just a moment, and then now it's going to do something new. So this frame is the last movement, and then it's held still for 2 keyframes. I didn't move it on these 2 right here. Alright, the next keyframe, I'm going to go over here, insert a new keyframe, and I'm actually going to rotate this as well. So it's going to rotate about 90 degrees. And we're going to manually rotate this. So I'm going to go over to my rotate tool, which is right up here, or the free transform tool. Click it, come up to your box, and then click and drag, and you'll see that this thing goes down in steps. It will lock into step places. Okay? What we want to do is just lock it into the very first position, pulling it down and to the right. Okay? So I'm just pulling it down and to the right. So this is where it started. Click, pull it down and to the right, just barely until it locks into the first position. Okay? Go to the next keyframe, hit F6, and lock it into the very next position. Click the next frame, hit F6, lock it into the very next position. Go to the next frame, hit F6, and we're going to keep doing this until it's all the way flat. Next frame, F6, lock it into position. Next frame, hit F6, lock that into position, and we are now at 90 degrees. Okay, so the next keyframe we're going to make, F6, we're going to have it stay still. Next keyframe, F6, have it stay still. And then this keyframe right here, F6, we're going to start moving it. So hold shift and we're just going to hit the left. Next keyframe, F6, shift, left. Next keyframe, F6, shift, left. Next keyframe, F6, shift, left. So I'm just shift lefting this every keyframe. So we're moving it back to the origin. We're going to move it over until it runs back into where our beginning. This thing is going to loop in a circle basically. Next keyframe, F6, shift, left. 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 Next keyframe with F6, whoops, shift, left, and I'm just going to keep doing this. So I'm not going to repeat this. Once you get a pattern going, go with it. But if you make a mistake, don't feel bad about having to Control Z your way back to where you were. Better that you get it right so that it looks right. I'll be able to tell if you didn't do it correctly. Okay, once you get up to a point where it looks like you're getting close, grab your onion skin and pull it back. Okay, we're getting pretty close to the point of origin. Oh, we're almost there. Just one more to go, probably, maybe two. One more. Alright. We are now back to the beginning. Yes, that looks really good. Okay, now, because this thing will go to frame 90, and this is where mine ended, yours will end maybe a little differently. It depends on your B shape. But roughly 90 frames is how long this took. Now this thing is basically going to loop in a circle, so let's go ahead and test this scene. Control test scene. Alright, so now we've got this thing moving in a triangular motion. It pauses slightly before it rotates, which is a nice little feature, and pauses before it moves over to the back to the left. And this is where we're going to save our item. Okay, so go ahead and save this.